And then discussion and possible recommendations on Tree Lane permanent supportive housing update.
Well, it seems like the council's gonna act before we meet again, so I guess I would just move that we recommend to the city council that they approve a substantial increase in supportive services funding to fully staff Tree Lane and allow for this stabilization team concept to improve stabilization and support.
Do you have a thought on what a substantial amount would be? I was thinking 110,000. Or maybe a couple hundred.
$400,000.
Maybe five.
$400,000.
$400,000.
Right here, 6.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like they're working on that, so, you know.
You can aim high.
I said the
I know
county
about
gives-
$400,000.
The county gives $395,000 and the council will chip in.
So I think we have a motion that we recommend the council allocate an additional $400,000 for supportive services for Tree Lane. Is there a second? Discussion.
I mean, sure, why not?
This
I mean,
needs
without
some
any
work.
detail to it, it's a little, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I guess-
why we got that number and what we expect out of it. And unfortunately, it's sort of mid-budget year, it makes it harder too.
Yeah, I feel like the city's looking at what that number should be, and they'll present it to the council, and we should be supportive of whatever that is. I don't know, but I feel like we should give them a number.
Lynette, Jim, do you have thoughts on what would be an appropriate amount or what's needed in terms of additional funding?
I don't think we will put a $400,000 proposal before the council. I remind you that the council has not acted on the security funding. That's still pending at $165,000, intended to be one time, but it's still there, and it would be a 2019 budget amendment. I think the supportive services number will be at least that large.
I mean, another way to do this is to articulate what we think that the dollar should cover. Instead of a dollar amount, say, funding should include these services or, 24/7 X, Y, and Z. Because I think it's hard to price those things. I've certainly gotten my fair share of pricing wrong. But then that would also be helpful to staff to articulate what we think is necessary for the satisfactory operations of the facility.
Jim?
So one of the decision points I think that the council will need to deal with is this notion of security funding or support services or both. I know that there has been some negative reaction to any proposal to add funding for additional security. I don't know what this group thinks about that, but that might be an action or a recommendation that would have some value to council members. From the perspective of those of us who've been working on this, I think we've always come at this as security funding would have some value in stabilizing the situation at the Tree Lane property, and from that more safe and secure environment, support services would be more likely to be effective. So, but I think that there are some council members that are struggling with the issue of whether they would want to support extra funding for security at all.
How much was the original budget for security? the original allocation for
So
security.
the original proposal, and this is the cost to add a second security staff position on weekends and during evening hours being from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. That annual cost is $175,000. It was pared back to $165,000 because it was prorated over the course of the year when we introduced that resolution a couple of weeks into the year. The annualized cost today would be probably less than $150,000. Again, this proposal has always been viewed as being one-time in nature. Allocating funding needed to cover that second position for the duration of 2019, but now we'll be, by the time the council gets to that resolution, we'll be 2 months into the year, so that $175,000 annual cost translates to a little less than $150,000 for 2019.
In case your question was a little like, what were we paying for before? So Heartland right now pays for a security guard to be there 24/7. Again, the city since the end of November has kind of created a safety team to address concerns at the building and surrounding the building. And one of the safety concerns that had been identified was, staff are there from 8 to 5:30. So it's great that this security officer, the front desk access, is kind of there during the day. So property management and the Y can work with, residents during the day. But at 5 p.m., when that staff leave, that's only one individual kind of trying to man the desk and also kind of walk around the perimeter of the property for security purposes. And we kind of identified that was kind of a safety concern, that a lot of activity was happening sometimes when that person would leave that secured access area. So really the whole goal of this second resolution is during that off-peak hours to have that second person there. I think it also will help in that relationship with the tenants as well. It's this private security company currently that's kind of manning that front desk. And I think when you have 2 people there, there's some more accountability on making sure the policies and procedures, the trauma-informed care, ensuring that the residents have rights and access is being met to our expectation. When there's only one person there, it's kind of a he said, she said moment when we do hear about concerns in the building. So I think there's accountability when you have 2 people there versus 1, as well with an increase of safety to the building.
So what's on your list of additional items you're requesting?
We're, so the second resolution, the support service resolution, is likely to focus on making sure there are the resources there to have that core staffing function, so case management function and a youth program coordinator. That had, I think Lynette mentioned in her remarks, that had been originally part of the vision for the staffing structure out there at Tree Lane, but the resources to support it didn't fully materialize. The other major element is how to occupy those 104 kids. I think we're particularly concerned about the coming summer, and then on an ongoing basis having opportunities for them to take part in after-school programming that exists with organizations like Lucia and the Elmer Park facility, and then ongoing summer programming. I think the last item that we're looking closely at is the ability to provide family counseling services, whether it's on site or whether that's part of what's happening with the school district. But we know that there are a good number of families living at Tree Lane that have experienced trauma and that could benefit from mental health counseling.
I trust what you two are saying, and think you believe it's right, but I don't understand why, if this is the point where we're trying to shift gears, we say, let's put $165,000 more into security instead of, and then we're gonna pull it out, instead of trying to really bolster the support and the staff, whether that's trained social workers, peer support people. I don't see how the security builds the community. I know, I mean, I appreciate the accountability aspect, but that can happen with another person. It doesn't have to be a security guard there to provide that accountability. So I'm concerned it's not a one-time thing and they don't get pulled out. And two, why not just set up the model the way we want it to be eventually with the services now? I understand there's a transition, you have to write the RFP and stuff like that, but it just, to me, it doesn't, I don't get that piece. I think that's hard to do, and I don't know. I'm not convinced, and I wouldn't support a motion to approve the additional security funding right now.
Well, maybe that's what motion you made.
I made a motion for services. I didn't make a motion for.
Well, but you could make a motion to recommend to the council not to reallocate the security. I mean, I don't know if I've been iffy on this, but if that's something you want, you can certainly ask the body to see if they support that, right?
Right, but I'm asking staff a question.
I know that in the last, as we've developed these proposals, there has been a lot of concern expressed, and I'm not talking about surrounding businesses, I'm not talking about the surrounding neighborhood, I'm talking about residents within the building who, in many cases, have expressed concerns about their own safety. And probably the biggest challenge right now at Tree Lane has been to get buy-in with respect to following protocols and safety measures regarding access to the building. And so, unfortunately, there are residents at Tree Lane that continue to thwart or frustrate security measures that are trying to be deployed and are bypassing those security measures and allowing people into that building that shouldn't be there, and in many cases have been involved in violence or are abusers. So we see this added security as a way to, I think, to normalize that property, to get buy-in with respect to the implementation of procedures and protocols regarding how people access the building, and making sure that folks that are not authorized to be in the property aren't, unless certain procedures are followed. So it really is about safety and security of the residents. Nobody that is working on this is happy about spending additional funding on security, but I think the consensus has been that a more stable and secure property will make additional support services more effective. So we sort of see them going hand in hand. I mentioned $175,000 cost, now $150,000. Those of us working on this hope that that isn't needed, that we'll get to a point perhaps by summer where there are established protocols and they are accepted by property residents, and that extra funding can fall away. But we've made the request for the full allocation for the year. And I don't think anybody that's been involved in that conversation intend for that security funding to extend beyond 2019.
Just to be clear, the proposal for the security, the additional security, came from the safety group that has been meeting? Is that correct?
Yes.
Because, I mean, I definitely see that point. I think it's a really good point. But I also feel like, I feel like you need that, plus you need the support services. And if you don't have the support services, you're gonna need the security forever. And so in a way, I think what I would be supportive of is saying, all right, approve the security to get through the stabilization period, but don't do it without doing the support services as well. And adding to that, because you really can't have one of them without the other.
I think we wish these two resolutions could have come together, but one of the things that we were trying to identify is through the government process of how to select a new provider through these competitive RFP processes, how we could do this in a time, and what are those services that are needed to make sure whatever dollar amount we're putting in that resolution is the appropriate dollar amount. We do not want to make the same mistake twice. So it was a lot of more time interviewing with the Y, talking with other agencies about potential costs. That kind of delayed the support services, but it's being introduced.
I have a question. If the additional security services money, it does not get approved or gets redirected to supportive services, they still have security in place, or they don't have any, because there's security right now. So this, and when I've been there, the person working the front desk has been a sole, just one person security guard during the middle of the day. Not a Drury Lane staffer, a contractor, private security guard. So I guess I'm wondering, what does this $150,000 do? Are you saying right now there isn't after-hours security, or this would add an additional security guard?
So right now, as of January 1st, when Heartland increased its spending on security from $145,000, they added about $81,000, and they now provide funding sufficient to have one security guard on the premises 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When there is property management staff or other staff on the property during the daytime, they've got that complementary staffing. As Lynette explained, when property management staff leaves the building, so evenings and on weekends, there's only the single security guard presence. When that person monitors the rest of the building or is called away for whatever reason, that front entrance is left unmonitored, and the experience has been that those are the times that...
But there's double locked doors and cameras throughout, right? So, I mean, maybe you have not been there yet. It is it feels like you're walking into a locked psych ward a little bit. I mean, it's a lot different than Refke Terrace, and it's very secure. You have to get through 2 levels of locked doors to get into common space, essentially, or where any apartments are. Which is interesting to me that it does have that different feel and design because there's children living there. But that's exactly how it feels when you walk in. I think the inside of the units are nice and welcoming and whatever, but that initial entry space, it's not like people are just walking in and out
No,
of the building.
When one person gains entrance and the door is open, it's not uncommon for others to, either at the invitation of residents, or sometimes people just taking advantage of the fact that the door is open. That's the situation that it is made more difficult to handle with just a single person on site. And when there isn't anybody monitoring the front entrance, again, unfortunately, it is occasionally the residents themselves that are allowing others to gain access, that haven't presented proper identification, followed proper protocols, or in some cases aren't authorized to be there.
I think that's the big thing, especially in our safety meetings that we talk about, is residents who have their own personal safety concerns of somebody coming to the building and trying to gain access. And because Madison is a very small community, someone else is that individual's friend, and that person is letting so it's other people allowing people who are victimizing other residents into the building. And when no one's at that front desk, there really is no control access there of someone who has been banned because someone has issued the Violence Against Women Act and said, please ban this person from the building, but they're still continuing to enter the building.
But, okay, so to that point though, is there not a different solution, a more lasting solution that involves more case management around that person's safety plan, whether it's a civil order for protection or, engaging with the police and pressing charges? Isn't that better than just hiring a security guard that's just going to watch the door all the time? I mean,
We absolutely think that a stronger case management function will be helpful. But keep in mind that we're going to be bringing in, upon the YWCA's departure, a new group of case managers, certainly from a reputable organization, people who know how to work with the population that they'll be working with, but it's going to take some time for them to develop the relationships that they're going to need to be successful. So it isn't as easy as bringing additional case managers in and expecting immediately for those relationships to be in place and for things to get approved. So we think a complementary, a combination of both added security, try to get on top of that front entrance situation with added support services is the formula for success.
has there been a lack of responsiveness from the Madison police at nighttime when the security runs into an issue? I'm just trying to figure out, there's apartment buildings, multi-unit buildings all over this city that don't have 2 security staff watching over them, don't have this level of locked entry. It just feels like these folks are being treated differently in a way that's very violative of their right to privacy, and we don't have enough money for the staffing, and yet we're doubling down on the security before we get to the staffing. And I know that's not intended to be a long-term thing, but it just doesn't feel right or pass the smell test that
So I don't want to
anyway.
debate in this setting, but there aren't probably a lot of properties in this city at which 2 homicide suspects have been taken into custody, and a shooting victim of or a shooting suspect in a third incident taken into custody. So there have been events that have taken place at the property that have given residents and property management and security staff reason to be concerned, and I think reason to want to redouble efforts to enhance the security at the building and the safety for the people that are living there.
We actually do have a motion. For Heidi's motion. We have a first, we have a second for that.
Was that the 400,000?
Is there any further discussion? On the motion? Do you have the motion language?
The language I have wasn't for the 400,000, but was to recommend the common council approve a substantial increase in supportive services funding to fully staff Tree Lane and allow for execution of the stabilization team approach.
That's the motion?
That's the motion I had.
I would say,
I don't know, but then
400
there was another one for the total.
yeah, I mean, I'll move, I guess, to amend that to say, for 400,000 for supportive services to implement the housing stabilization.
I'll second. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. Abstentions?
Wait, what?
Probably.
Is that a yes?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I feel like, I'm saying no only because of the $400,000. I think I completely support supportive services, but I think that, it needs to be at a reasonable level, and $400,000, they're spending $165,000 right now. To add $400,000 is, I don't think that we should be telling them what that number should be. It should come out of the RFP process that they're going through to get the bids.
Well,
But we voted in on
the
it, so.
resolution's gonna have a number in it, my understanding is, so that there will be amount put out in the RFP.
Right, and that would be the amount that I would support.
I guess my, this is on the main motion.
Oh.
Did we, does that pass, the amendment?
No,
Are you abstaining?
I'm staying too.
Okay, so we have 3 ayes, 1 no, 2 abstentions.
Passes.
So we had Palm and Williams abstain. And Camp, no.
My concern is if we just leave it at substantial, and is that, then the council might decide what that substantial means, and I expect they're not gonna maybe pass $400,000. Sometimes this committee passes larger items, and then by the time they get to the body, they, bring them down a little bit, but, I guess by putting a big number out there, that might not get there. In total, at least tells them it needs to be a really big number, and so that's my thought on why it should be a stated number that's substantial. So, number in there, and that's why I think we should support the amendment. We talked a lot about the security aspect, and I guess I would just leave that lie at this point. I don't feel, I understand what staff is saying. I don't feel like I really support that effort necessarily, but I understand what they're saying and think that there's probably some reasonable reasons for why they're pursuing it, but I would prefer us to make a strong statement in support of supportive services, and I don't feel that same level of support for security.
So we're ready to move on now?
So we voted on the
We voted
amendment
on
for
the
the $400,000, but we have to vote on the
Oh,
motion.
the original.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's been moved and seconded as well. Okay, we'll vote on the original motion. All those in favor? Aye.